Hey everyone, I want to welcome you to Bible 365, and I'm your host, Kathy Carter. Okay, so before I start, I just wanted to, this is not a fashion show, but it is a fashion show. So I just want to let you know that my order from Temu just came in, and I'm such a mark for Temu. So I got my new glasses, which I'm crazy excited about. But I just wanted to show my other glasses that I got that I am definitely going to display sometime soon. Okay, so these are them. Are they too outrageous? Are they too much? Do they make me look like Edna? I think it's Edna or maybe Ethna from The Incredibles. I feel like it sort of does, but I love them. I'm obsessed with them, and I can't wait to wear them. But anyway, they don't go with this outfit, but I will be wearing them. So just so we can check out my Temu order. I think these glasses were like $1. They're reading glasses, and so I'm wildly excited about them. And I will have a handful of different ones that you guys are going to see over the next couple of episodes. So, all of that being said, this is Bible 365. If you have never been with me before, you got to see my Temu order, at least part of my Temu order. But you also are here, hopefully, if you're here for the first time. I am reading through the Bible chronologically, which means I'm reading through it historically, right? So, cover to cover, every page, every day, I'm doing reading. It's in the neighborhood of like 3 to 4 chapters every day. And it's historical. So it goes from Genesis all the way to the book of the Revelation to John. And but like everywhere in between, it's the way that things happened historically, chronologically. So it helps make sense. The study plan that I'm using, the reading plan that I'm using, is from oneyearbibleonline.com. And you would just go on there and you would download the chronological Bible reading plan, print it up. It is a free reading plan. You can also buy a book, but at this point, you might be so far in with me that you don't need to buy a book. You just go buy that reading plan. And so every day it has a particular reading, and sometimes things overlap and books overlap. And so that's just why the book itself makes it really easy, but that's a fate. And I always want to say I have no affiliation with oneyearbibleonline.com. I just love it. I love their reading plan. It chronologically, I feel like it makes more sense than some of the other ones that I have done. So for me, it seems to fall the most in line chronologically as far as possible. All right. Today is day 147. So we're really getting there. We're like so close to halfway. It is May 26th, and our reading for today is 1 Kings 4 and Psalms 72 and 127. So we're coming to the end of King Solomon. So right now, King Solomon is on the throne. He has been on the throne for more than 20 years. He's been doing a lot of things on the throne. We got to hear about how wise he was and how he judged people, how he made the temple, how he made the palace, how he made a special house for his wife, the daughter of Pharaoh, right? So all of these things that Solomon did, and how he leads in the time of peace. And so today we're just doing a little bit of follow-up on Solomon and a lot of the wealth and stuff that Solomon had as well. Solomon is the son of King David. King David was the first ruler over all 12 tribes. Saul was as well. He was a king over the 12 tribes, but they split up relatively quickly because he was after David. And so Saul was the first king. David was the second king of Israel. And then Solomon is now the third king, and he's David's son through Bathsheba. All right, so today it is 1 Kings 4. We're starting in. It says, so King Solomon ruled over all Israel, and these were his chief officials. And so they have this whole list of officials, priests, secretaries, recorders, which I always find amazing because not that we don't have recorders now, but it's just something that we don't really think about, I think, at least for me. It's not really something I ever thought about. I thought, who wrote this book? Well, maybe King Solomon wrote this book. Well, he didn't write. He probably didn't write this book. Not that he didn't add to this book, but it was a recorder who wrote this book. And probably over time, it was recorders and historians who wrote all this information and then compiled it and put it all together. So the recorder always got me. And a lot of these names we've had before. Zadok and Abiathar, they're the priests. Now, I wanted to note this, that Azariah is the son of Nathan. And Nathan was one of the ones who was sort of like a prophet and a priest for David. So it was Samuel, then Nathan, and now his son is, Nathan's son is in charge, Nathan's son is in charge of the district governors. So there's also Zabad, son, I might pronounce that wrong, son of Nathan, and he's a priest and advisor to the king. So we have two of Nathan's sons on the council of Solomon. So just like Solomon is the son of David, they have these sons in here as well. And then, of course, Zadok was also and is still a priest, and his son is still a priest. And we do see this a lot in the kingdom of Israel. We see a lot of like family lines, like not saying we don't see it here sometimes, but it seems to be extremely common that if you were a musician in the house of Israel, right? So if you're a musician that plays an instrument and is serving through worship and thanksgiving, in the temple, then your children are as well, and their children, and right, so on and so on and so on. And so it tends to be a family line, descendants that follow in those steps. All right. And so then it says in verse 7, Solomon had 12 district governors all over Israel. So it looks like every tribe of Israel who supplied provisions for the king and the royal household. So every month, each one provided, so there were 12 of them, and every month, each one provided food for provisions, right? Things for them to eat, them, Solomon, and his whole household. And so somebody provided that every month. Also in abundance of all the other things he had. What I wanted to note is that it's 12, which is great because it's for a year, right? Which actually, believe it or not, I never even put that together, that it was 12 sons, 12 months in the year, 12 disciples, right? I never really put those things together. Now I am. So I find that interesting that God created those things, right? He's creating that order out of chaos. But these aren't actually the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of the things that I noticed, and I mentioned a couple days ago, is the kingdom of Solomon doesn't really have all those pieces of the 12 tribes of Israel. It looks a little bit different. It goes a little bit higher, but it also goes off to the, I believe it's going to be the west. I believe it goes off to the west a little bit because it's not really, no, it goes off to the east a little bit because to the west is towards the water. So it goes off to the east a little bit into land, and then that area near the water is Phoenicia, which used to be some of the tribes of Israel. There's also a little area down below that is for the Philistines, and that used to be in the tribe of I think it was Judah was in that area. And so I noticed that some of those areas are foreigners, and then a huge other amount of area is area that that David conquered, and that is above and beyond the 12 tribes of Israel. I tell you this, all of this, to sum up that it doesn't really look like it's broken up in the 12 tribes of Israel anymore. We've got some of them here. So we've got Benjamin, right? We've got Issachar, we've got Naphtali and Asher, but there's also, and then we've got Ephraim. But then in verse 9, it says Ben Decker, it's Makaz, Shalbam, Beth Shemesh, and Elon Bethanon, and that's Judah. So that's great. So we've got a lot of Judah. I don't know why it doesn't just say Judah, so it might just take up parts of Judah. And then we have Manasseh kind of all over the place. So Ben Hesed, that area is in Manasseh. Ben Abinadab, that area is Manasseh. Bana, son of Ahilud, that is in Manasseh, right? So there's like a lot of these tribes are in Manasseh. We've got Gilead, which I think is also in Manasseh. And so, and remember, Manasseh was kind of broken up. There was a huge landmass in Manasseh, and it was east and west of the Jordan. And so there was a huge landmass, but it looks like the tribes have shifted a little bit. There are still 12 of them. So it's not important in the grand scheme of things, right? But it's just something that you want to note, right? So there's a recognition there that Israel doesn't look like Israel does right now. So Canaan that they took over looks a little bit different. And then some of the areas that they conquered look a little bit different. And so just to be aware of those things when we look back and we start thinking about what territory Solomon did or didn't have, and then who those tribes were that made up those things. Like Simeon doesn't have a tribe. Reuben no longer seems to have a tribe. And some of these things were promised in the beginning because if you remember, it was prophesied by Jacob that Reuben would not have a tribe because Reuben was the one who slept with his concubine. I wanted to say wife, and I knew it wasn't wife. So slept with his concubine. So here we go. So some of these cycles we start to say, and there are other things as well in here that I wanted to note. So, all right. So moving on to 1 Kings 4:20. So anyway, that was just like kind of an overview of the area, and he's just going over. If you remember, this is just a follow up on all the things he's going over. Every time there's a big change, they seem to reiterate who does what, where it is, and all those kind of things. Okay, So then we're moving on to verse 20. It says, the people of Judah and Israel, and it is broken up in Judah and Israel, although they have not yet split into Judah and Israel. There will come a time, I hate to even give you some of that advance notice, but there will come a time where the territories literally completely split and there's a king over each one. That doesn't happen yet. However, there has been a lot of talk about Judah and Israel because they seem to have some of these splits in the past, right? So there seems to be areas where they've split before, especially during the time of Judges. We saw a lot of splitting before they came together under King David. We saw a lot of splits happening. And again, it was split in Judah and sort of the rest of the 11 tribes. All right, so it says the people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore. This is another prophecy. All right, so going back, not that it is a prophecy here that it's telling the future, but it's something that happened. Okay, so this is prophesied way back when. So if we're going to go back to Genesis 22, and I'm going to go to verse 15. It says, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, this was back when he was ready to sacrifice Isaac. Because you have done this and you have not withheld your son, your only son. Verse 17, it says, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. So this is part of the prophecy, right? So he said these things, and now we see these things. In verse 20, it says, the people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Now, I want to note that, sure, someone could have read that in Genesis and just repeated it, right? Boy, there are a lot of people here, right? And so this does take a little faith to say, because we have to, what we would have to concede to, I think, what we'd have to concede to is that Moses likely wrote Genesis. And so this was hundreds of years after Moses. And so the authors are not the same people, right? So we would have to at least concede that it's not the same person writing the same thing, right? So what we could say is well, sure, he saw that and, the author saw that and wrote that up. That's possible, right? But my faith would say that there are so many millions of people in Israel. They use this expression, the people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore, right? And maybe they repeated it. Maybe that was something they said over and over and over again. But at this time and in this place, there were millions upon millions of people under the kingdom of Solomon. And so that they noted that. All right, then it says Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt. They all brought tribute and they were subjects to Solomon. Discusses all the stuff that Solomon had, like all that he was given. And then it says in verse 25, during Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel from Dan to Beersheba lived in safety, everyone under their own vine and under their own fig tree. So during the reign of Solomon, during the reign of David, there was a lot of war, right? People were going to war and not huge amounts were dying, right? Because they were winning, but people were dying. And there was time where there was like civil war, what we would call civil war. They were internally fighting, right? When any of the sons took over, there was some internal fighting and internal disputes. That's not happening now. There is peace, there is abundance, there is safety, right? So all of these things, there is so much prosperity in the kingdom of Israel during the reign of Solomon. So to live at that time would have been extraordinary. And then it says in verse 29, God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. So obviously that expression means a lot. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. Verse 32 follows up and says, he spoke 3,000 proverbs and his songs numbered 1,005. Now we know that David wrote so many of the Psalms and they were made into songs. We know that David consistently did that. Solomon did this as well. So Solomon loved the Lord. Solomon wrote music, right? Praise, thanksgiving, all of these things. We don't have, I don't think, a huge amount of them kept in this book. So they may be elsewhere. I don't think we've come across them, but we do have some. And so we'll get to hear a little bit of what Solomon has to say, although one of them looks like it's David's. But we get to hear a little bit of what Solomon had to say. But he also wrote Proverbs, which is something we're going to start going into tomorrow. And so Proverbs are sort of like snippets of wisdom. And I'll go a little bit more into that. But he was so wise, and he judged all the time, and he had all of these people coming to him all over the world for decades. He had all these people coming to him from all over the world, who loved him and honored him and recognized his wisdom. And so he then shares some of his wisdom with his people from Israel and with the world. So from there, we are going to move on to Psalm 72. So this is a Psalm of Solomon. So we get to hear just some of the words that he wrote. And again, this is what I appreciate about this, and same thing I appreciate about David is we hear all these stories about him, but when we hear their Psalms, it's actually more from their heart, right? So we recognize the way they are thinking, the way they believe, and what they want to share with the rest of the world. So he's speaking to God. And he's talking a lot about himself and the things that he's asking from God, and of course his people as well. So we're starting in verse 1. It says, endow the king. Oh, by the way, I want to, before I start, I actually want to finish with verse 20, because I think it makes it slightly confusing, because it starts out and it says, this is a Psalm of Solomon, as if Solomon wrote it. And then verse 20, it says, this concludes the prayers of David, son of Jesse. So is this Solomon, or is this David? Is this Solomon uh, uh, um, reiterating the word, or repeating the words that he heard his father saying? Or is this something that David said on his deathbed that Solomon wrote? I think we can think maybe any of those things. It could be Solomon writing about his father, right? So I feel like it can be a couple interpreted, let's just say, a couple of different ways. But what we want to note is that, and I want to say that it doesn't sound like David. This doesn't sound the same as a lot of it, because we read so many of his Psalms. This doesn't quite sound the same as any of the other things that he wrote, which leads me to believe that it could be Solomon and he's just sort of writing in David's voice. Or maybe David was speaking to him and he wrote it down in song, right? Something more like that. It feels like it's something more along the lines of that than that it was David who wrote this. So, as I always like to say to you guys, this is my opinion. I don't necessarily think it changes the heart of what's being said. This is just my opinion on the matter, that it could be Solomon, it could be David, but it's basically the heart of a king, and it's talking about what it is to be king and what he's asking for as the king. So he says, endow the king with your justice, O God. Right? So what he is looking for is he's looking for God he's the king of the nation, and as I've said on more than one occasion, he's judging all these people. These people are coming in from all over the world. He's already asked for wisdom, right? So if it's Solomon, again, he's already asked for wisdom. So he's saying, endow him with justice, making things right, doing what is right and what is good and what is just. If someone is hurt, then making him whole again, right? This is what we want in our nation all the time. This is why we fight for certain rights and we fight for laws to come in, right? When we see all of these bad things happening, we want to fight for what is just. This is what he's asking for. So just think about that. Like, he's not saying, I want to be right all the time. He's saying he wants justice. He wants God to provide the king with God's justice. So with his idea of what's good and bad. The royal son with your righteousness. So justice and righteousness. May he judge your people in righteousness, your afflicted ones with justice. So again, the ones that get hurt, give them justice in anything that they do. So then he's saying, bring prosperity and goodness to your people. Save the children of the needy. So he's just asking all of this for the people that he loves, that he's in charge of, his land of Israel. May he, and then he's going back to himself as king. So may the king endure as long as the sun, as long as the moon, through all generations, right? May the righteous flourish, prosperity abound. So he's asking for all goodness. And one of the things that I found interesting about my heart, which I've shared this with you guys in the past, when I read this, I can't help actually but get frustrated, because I'm like, oh, he's asking for prosperity and he's asking for good stuff and he's asking. May he rule from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. May other people bow down before him and his enemies lick the dust. Like, in some ways, I'm kind of like, ew. I like to be open as much as possible. That's what's kind of in my heart, because as we're growing up in our generations and where we are in this time period in our life, we're learning that nobody is better than anybody else. And I want to highlight that I agree that people aren't better um, for the way that they look, for their job, for their education level, for the amount of money they make, right? Like, so I'm going to wholeheartedly agree with that. Righteousness is a little bit different. And so there is something to be said that being more righteous is better. Uh, and even again, one of those things that, like, as soon as it comes out, I'm like, oh, I want to pull that back in. But there is truth to it. Our goal in life should never be to be the best or the most amazing, or I have so much pride in the work that I do. But righteousness is the key to life, it's the key to community, right? We should want not only what's righteous for ourselves, but what's righteous for other people. And so when we do something that's unrighteous, we should be there to try and fix it. We should be open to this idea that we have been unrighteous and desirous of fixing that unrighteousness for whoever that we hurt, right? Or if we see someone being hurt, we should desire righteousness for that, right? Justice and righteousness. And so I think that there is something to be said that being righteous is better than being unrighteous. And I'm sure everyone would probably agree with that. We would probably just disagree on what it means to be righteous. So obviously I think, like, there would be, whether the religious or the unreligious or the different types of religion, right? So we would all probably have slight disagreements on what it means to be righteous. But that's ultimately, as a human, what we would desire is the best thing for the community of humans to work together. So this is what God, or Solomon, the king, is asking for. And then it says in verse 12, for he, the king will deliver the needy who cry out, the afflicted who have no one to help. The king's going to take pity on the weak and the needy. This is what your king is for. Your leader is there for, not for the ones who are prospering and doing amazing. That's not what your head of whatever is there for. Your head of the church, your head of your state, your head of your country. That's not their primary goal. Their primary goal is for the needy, right? For the afflicted. So there's something to be said about loving on the needy and the afflicted in ways to help them prosper and to give them justice. Long may he live. And again, the king, he's looking for gold. And this is, again, why it makes more sense as Solomon. May gold from Sheba be given him. And gold from Sheba was given him. So then he says, then in verse 17, it says, then all the nations. So if all of these things happen, here we go. End goal, something I've talked about, I feel like almost every day here. End goal, if everything happens that Solomon is asking for, then all the nations, everyone in the world, all the nations will be blessed through this king. So if all these things happen, all the nations of the world will be blessed through this king, and they will call him blessed. So they'll recognize that he's blessed, and because he is blessed and everything around him is blessed, then all will be blessed through him, right? And then possibly in the future, nod, nod, wink, wink again, possibly in the future, there will be blessings directly through him and through his descendants. And then, of course, he just gives praise to the Lord and his name forever. And then we conclude it with, this is the prayer of David, son of Jesse. All right, last one here. This is Psalm 127. This is a song of ascent. And I feel like this is in two pieces, although it's probably not, but it's just the way that my brain wraps around these things. It looks like 1 through verses 1 and 2 are one psalm, and then verses 3 through 5 are another. I don't necessarily see how they connect. I'm sure they do. I'm sure there's a connection. And possibly it was in the life of Solomon that he was discussing these things. So to him, it completely made sense. To me, it feels like it's split. So I'm going to tell you that I'm sure it was together, but I am going to sort of talk about it in pieces. And it's a really short one, so we'll get through this quick. Verse 1, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. So this section, I'm going to say, is all about giving everything to the Lord, right? You can, all day long, you can go, I've got to work harder for this, or I've got to do that, or I have to figure out a way to get my chair fixed. I have to figure out a way to get a better job. And that's great. And I don't want to take anything away from anybody on this planet, even followers of Christ, who say, I have to and I need to work for that. Okay, so I want to honor that. In the same respect, if you do that without leaving it to the Lord, it doesn't matter. It's all in vain. And another word for vain is without success or result. So I'm gonna push back on this. Can someone who doesn't love the Lord work really hard, get an amazing job, and see success and result? Of course. I would be completely ignorant if I said that wasn't true. If I came to you and I said, anyone who is poor obviously doesn't love the Lord, and everyone who is flourishing obviously loves the Lord, right? Because if not, what they do is in vain. We must be careful with that. We must be careful with the way that we define things. In vain means it's pointless without the Lord. Just pointless. So sure, you can have 7 cars. You can have a job that you are the most accomplished person in that job. You are the best at what you do. And I'll tell you, I'm a fitness instructor. I want to be the best. I do. I work to be the best. I strive to be the best. I want to. Without the Lord, it doesn't matter if I'm the best fitness instructor on the earth. Who cares? Not only is one day someone going to replace me, right? I'm not going to go down in history as the best fitness instructor, right? And no one's going to go, in 75 years, no one's going to go, wait, man, do you remember that Kathy Carter's spin class? We're all going to be dead. No one's going to remember that. So that's true, right? But on top of that, it doesn't matter if it's only an earthly treasure. So if I do live in infamy, if somehow at the place I work, I get a plaque with my picture and my name on it, and it says all time best fitness instructor that ever existed. They write down the year and they say, no one will ever beat her. She's just the best there ever was and the best there ever will be. It's vanity. It's nothing. It's in vain. There's no success there. It's worldly success that's shallow, and that just it floats away in the palm of your hands. The Lord is everything. And I know I repeat this. The Lord is everything. So you give yourself to the Lord, right? I give my job to the Lord. I'm so thankful that the Lord has kept me in my 48 years walking on this earth. I am still able to sit on a bike and teach a spin class. Without God, I couldn't do it. And if I do it without God, who cares? Right? If my health is just my health without God, it doesn't matter. And so that's what it means to be in vain. So that's what it means without success. Your success is determined by your love for the Lord. And pardon me if you are someone who doesn't love the Lord, because I call you to love the Lord, because I really strive to want you to understand that without the Lord, it's nothing. So when you write to me and you say it's fiction, or it's dangerous, or it's only there to hurt people, right? Or it causes people to do horrible things, I plead with you to reconsider. And this is why we're reading, because I want you to reconsider, because I want you to see who God is, the wisest king that ever lived, this one that lives in infamy, that I think everyone who is Christian, not Christian, Israeli, not Israeli, Hebrew, not Hebrew, everyone knows who that is. Everyone's heard of him. They do discovery shows on trying to find his treasures. So like regular TV channels talk about him. But if he did not give his heart and everything he owned and all of his thanksgiving to the Lord, it would have all been in vain. Ending on that. Here we go. I'm like the coughing fit of the century. I keep having coughing fits. It must be outside. It must be like the pollen or something. Anyway, so there's that, right? So there's that section. I'm finishing with this section. Children are a heritage from the Lord. So it's connected. We finish up and we say, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep. In vain you rise early and stay up late. So in vain, with no success. You rise up early, you stay late. None of this matters. Toiling for food to eat, right? Again, this is all in vanity without the Lord. He, the Lord, grants sleep to those he loves. Children are a heritage to the Lord. A heritage is a possession. So it's something that they own. So children, all children, are owned by the Lord. The Lord owns all those things. They are all his possession. Offspring, your children, are a reward to him. So I think he's talking to the Israelite people and discussing how the Israelite children are a reward to the Lord. So this is good. He has told his people to multiply, right? And it says, like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. So it's good to essentially arrows in the hands of a warrior, right? So it's good to have arrows in your. If you're a warrior, it's pretty important to have an arrow in your hand, right? You would be much more successful. You would have a better chance of contending with your opponent if you had an arrow in your hand. And so he said, they're like kids. It would be great if you had a whole bucket full of kids. That would be a blessing, and that would be good from the Lord, right? So again, I feel like this might be a little bit different, but he's probably talking about himself, and he's talking about the blessing of having as many kids as he has, because he has 1 bazillion wives. So he probably has 2 bazillion children, right? So he's got a lot of kids. And so this is a blessing from the Lord to have these kids. These kids are an honor to have from the Lord, right? These are given from the Lord. And it says they're a heritage to him. So God owns them. He owns every one of them. So for those of you who have kids, they're God's first. They're ours second. Hard thing to wrestle with a little bit, but I feel like that's one of the things that God discusses. So, and we're all the Lord's. All right. So that's where I'm ending today. Just on time for that dog to bark. So what I want you to do is I want you to like this video. I want you to share it. I want you to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell, because this is going to give you notifications every day. And I come back every day. So if this is your first time listening, I will be here every day discussing the word. And so I'll be back tomorrow. And in the meantime, I want you guys to, this is bouncing, so I apologize. My dog's walking on the deck. But in the meantime, keep reading. See you next time.